Hello, Michal Hucko here and welcome to another lecture of our Django or REST API class. If you enjoy watching these videos, please like this video, subscribe and leave a nice comment under this video. Thank you very much. In this lecture, I'm going to show you how you can create your first Django project. Before we start, some of you may be confused what is the difference between the Django and Django REST framework, which I mentioned a couple of lectures ago. So Django is a tool which is dedicated for creating web applications in the Python, right? So you can use Django for implementing backend services, or you can implement the whole like a full stack web application with the front end and backend. Yes, Django allows you to use something which is called Django templates for creating very nice HTML, CSS based front end websites and so on. But in this video, we're going to talk about REST APIs. You can use Django, just solely the Django framework, for implementing the REST APIs. Yes, Django is sufficient. But the process of implementing REST APIs using solely Django can be a little bit obscure. This is the reason why Django REST framework, right? The framework is in the name, so it's Django REST framework comes into play. So this framework allows you to implement the REST APIs in a much simpler way. In this lecture, we will be first concentrating more on the Django, but later in future lectures, I will show you how you can use Django REST framework for implementing the REST APIs. So in the previous video, we installed the virtual environment in your computer. Right now, I'm in the Git bash and I'm gonna first activate the virtual environment because this is always the first step. So I'm using the source, and I'm going here to the script folder and I'm running the activate script. Now the Django REST framework is being activated, and when I press pip list, you will see that the Django is being installed, right? Always activate your virtual environment before using the Django if the Django is installed solely in the virtual environment, because as I showed in the previous video, I didn't install it for the global Python. So now I have here a Django, right? And the first thing what you need to do is create something which is called project. So in the Python, when you have a long code with bunch of lines, you are organizing those files, those lines into files and those files into folders, right? So these folders and files are called Django modules, or sorry, Python modules. And in this way, you need to create some folder structure when you are implementing some complex systems like backend services or REST APIs, right? And that's the reason why Django provides you a tool which is called project. So project is a structure built on top of the files, which helps you to organize your code. So first you need to create this project. And how are you gonna do it? With the tool which is called Django admin. Django admin executable is available in your computer after you install the Django. So because I installed the Django, right now Django admin is available in my virtual environment and I can use it. Django admin has multiple functions, and one of the functions which we're going to use, it's called start project. Yeah, so start project accepts one argument, which is the name of the project which we want to create. Now you can choose whatever name you want, but there are some rules. The name of the project can consist only from all lowercase letters, and if you are considering multiple words in the name, you can split them using the snake case. Snake case means that between the words you are putting the underscore, okay? Not the dash, but the underscore. So not the kebab case. Kebab case is like word dash word, okay? But we are using snake case, which is word underscore word. There is also a camel case, which is a capital word, and the next is capital word, right? So we are using snake case. And now what should be the name? Okay, here a couple of recommendations. If you are going to work in a team, please first discuss the naming conventions of your team or your company first. Okay, whatever name you choose, it's good. Until it's like agreed in the company or with your teammates who will be working on this project with you. Okay, so take your time to choose the correct name. This is the tutorial, a class where I want you to learn something, okay? So I'm gonna use as simple name as possible, but please don't use this naming convention which I use in a team. First, discuss the solution or the naming conventions with your team. So in my case, I'm going to name it school underscore project. I'm calling it in this way intentionally, so later you will see the code better, or you will understand the structure better. So after you specify the name, you hit the enter, and now the Django behind the scenes will create a folder structure for you, and it will generate a couple of files and folders for you which are necessary for running the Django application. Now after running this, inside your directory there will be a folder which we will now go into. So I'm using the cd command. If you are using the cmd, the command line from Windows, you need to use the dir command, which I showed in the previous video. So I'm going inside the school_project folder, which was created here. And as you will see, right now I'm inside here. And first thing which I will do is I will open this project or this folder, specifically this folder, inside my Visual Studio Code running the code.command. This is a command line utility from Visual Studio Code. This will open the folder in my Visual Studio Code in a couple of seconds. So, and now if you look inside the folder, you will see that there is a folder with the same name. Yeah, this is strange, right, Mikhail? Why is it like that? This is exactly how it should be. Django is creating folder, and inside the folder is the folder with the same name. This can be confusing for someone, beginner. It's okay, it's normal. The next thing what is here, it's a manage_py command, which is part of this school project folder. So first start with the manage_py command. Manage_py allows you to use some command line utility, which is called manage_py, which is connected with the Django REST framework. You know it's a command line utility because of this first line. This means that you want to use this command line utility in the Python environment as a command line executable, right? This command may seem at the first glance as something complicated, but it's nothing else, just setting up some environment variable, specifying where the settings file is being located. We're going to talk about the settings file in a while. And then you are just running a function which is imported from Django core management called execute from command line, which is then running this function with the arguments which you are running these manage_py arguments with. Yeah, I hope I didn't say it wrong. Yeah, so arguments from manage_py are being passed to this execute from command line function, which is being imported from here. Fine. Manage_py is nothing else, just a script running another script. Fine. And then it's connected with Django. It has to be there. So maybe in the future you will adjust here just small changes. But in most of the time, you won't be touching this code at all. Let's look inside the school project. So the name of this folder will depends on the name of the project which you specify. It should be the same as your project name. When you click here, you will see there are a bunch of files already created for you. And this is something what I don't like about the frameworks. They are doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And those lazy beginners are then too lazy to check on the internet what are these files doing. Or what are these files used for? Now I will go through the files one by one. You don't need to understand everything. I just want you to passively listen. And then in the future, when I will mention, you will immediately know in which of these files it was. I hope so, yeah, but I know it's not possible. Just like first time you are hearing this kind of information. Yeah, so you can always go back to this video and rewatch it again and then recall what I was saying. So the init.py. This init.py is a special file. I think it's not needed now, but the authors of Django are still using it. So init.py is a file which should always reside in the folder with the Python scripts. And this file indicates that this folder is a Python module, meaning that in this folder there are Python files which you want to import in some different files even outside of this folder. So this is the purpose of this init.py file. But as you can see, this init.file is empty, and in most of the cases you will encounter init.py, it will be an empty file. Starting Python 3.6 something, the init.py is obsolete, but many times you can use these frameworks with different versions of Python, so I believe that's the reason why the authors are still keeping this init.py here. Now I will skip the ascii.py and I will go straight to the settings.py. Settings.py is the most important file of the whole Django. It's the most important file for Django. Here, all the necessary configuration values are being specified. So many times you want to have some configuration, for example, some passwords or some module names or some versions of, I don't know, something, right? And you want to specify it in one place for one reason. When you want in the future to change some of this configuration, you only need to adjust one file. You don't need to go through all the files where you are importing or using this value, right? So you just adjust one file and you are done. That's the reason why settings.py exists. In this settings.py, you will see a bunch of settings which are not necessarily to understand right now, but I will just briefly go through them. Base there is just specifying the name of the folder where the project resides. If you were using Python in previous projects and using multiple modules and importing stuff from different folders, you encountered a lot of problems saying like module doesn't exist even though the module existed. This is one of the solutions how Django is trying to solve it. So then when you go next, there is a secret key. This secret key is used with the production server. So later when you will deploy, or we will deploy, if there will be interest in, I can show you how to deploy this stuff, for example, in public cloud. You will want to run this server, this REST API server in the production environment. And in the production environment, many times you want to encrypt the communication. For the encrypt communication, you need a secret key to encrypt it, right? And so this is the pre-generated secret key, which was dedicated for this app. You can change this value anytime, but the important thing is you are not sharing this value with anyone. Yeah. You are not even pushing it in Git in some very secure companies. So this is a security key which you should keep in a secure place, not sharing with anyone. Perfect. Next thing is a debug option. Debug option helps you to track the bugs in your code when the debug option is set to true. For this reason, you should only, and remember, only use debug set to true in a development environment in your local computer. Never deploy an app to a production environment with debug true. If you will go to company and you will be working on some Django project and you will see that they have a debug true option in the production, you should come to a DevOps person or to the main engineer and say, guys, you cannot have this debug true option in production. The reason for it is because debug will log a lot of information into the console. And many times sensitive information can be outputted into the console, and some evil guys can then read it from the console and misuse it. Debug true only in development. Allow host is connected with something which is called the course policy. We're going to talk about this maybe later. But then there is the installed apps. And this is important. Django is not only structuring the code into projects, but the projects are structuring the code into apps. Apps stands for applications, okay? And you can have multiple applications in your project. In the later lecture or video, I'm going to show you how you can create your first application. But it's important to know that the Django comes with pre-installed and pre-configured applications, which are part of your project, even that you didn't ask for that. So there is this admin app, which allows you to access the admin view, which we ain't going to use, but it's there. There is the out option, which allows you to authenticate users and comes with an authentication mechanism, which is quite good. It's useful. You can use it. Then there is this content types, session, messages, static files. All these applications help you to run your servers. And many of these applications, for example, the static files are connected with frontend, which we ain't gonna use, but it's here. So just remember, many of these applications are pre-configured with your start project command. So don't forget to comment them if you don't want to use them. For example, if you don't want to use the admin, you just comment it from here and it's gone. Middleware are applications or webhooks or Python modules which are applied on each of your requests. So these are connected with security, session management, course security, and this kind of stuff, okay? We ain't gonna talk too much about the middleware, but in the future, when you're gonna read something about the middleware, this is the part where it's configured. Then this is important. This is a specification of a configuration file for URLs. So in the previous lectures, we were talking about URLs, and now you should be familiar with it. So many times you want to specify the resource URL, and we were talking about the resources. These /films, you remember from the last video when we were talking about the SWAPI API for Star Wars films, right? So this is the file where it is configured. Look at it. It's called schoolproject.urls, and that's the file under here, right? So here is just the specification, the base specifications. Right now there are just 4 lines with a bunch of comments where you specify the URLs. In the future lecture, I'm going to show you how you can play around with this. So that's the root URL config and the urls.py file. Templates are connected with the front end. We ain't going to use too much of the templates in this course, but it's set up here. Next thing is WSGI application. WSGI application is the application which is running your development server, and it's used for development. So you need to understand that when you run a Django, it's running a Python interpreter, right? And inside the code is being executed and stuff like this. And in order to put it somewhere, for example, into your local computer, you need to build around it a web server, right? So the web server is not the Django itself, but it's a web server. Inside this web server is running the Django, and WSGI is the web server, right? the development web server which we're gonna use. You can use this web server also for production, which is something which is called UWSGI, but I ain't gonna talk about this too much right now because that's some advanced stuff which we may be gonna cover in the future lectures if you will be interested in and if there will be enough likes and subscribes on my channel, because yeah, that's like motivating me much. Okay, so WSGI application part. Databases is the specification of the database engine. So you understand that these backends are communicating with the databases, and you need to specify the engine of the database which you're going to use. Out of the box, the database engine is set to SQLite. SQLite is a database which is running inside a file. So inside here, a file will be created where the SQLite will be writing all the data. And you can query then this file using SQL. It's quite handy when you are developing, but in the production, you should not use this. In the production, you should be considering some relational databases or non-relational databases. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can connect your Django application to the Postgres in later lectures. So this is the part which we're going to adjust. Then you have here the out password validators. These validators are being applied on the passwords because I mentioned the Django comes with pre-installed authentication mechanisms, and here you need some passwords. So all these are validators against your passwords. For example, the minimum length of the password, the common password validator, like it should consist of letters, numbers, blah, 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 all this kind of crazy stuff which you are used to. This part is regarding the time zone and internalization. Many times you want to have your application in multiple languages running in different time zones. This is the part where you specify the variables regarding this. The static file is a specification of the folder where the static files are located. For example, your CSS files or JavaScript files or some images, some assets which are part of the front end. Most of the time this is connected with the front end and not with the back end, but yeah, I'm just mentioning it so you know. And this default auto field is connected with the database primary key field, right? Default is set to big auto field. We're going to talk about this later. Fine, so this is the settings pie. And important stuff here is to remember that the settings are located in one place, which is inside the project, inside the folder, which is called the same as project, and inside the settings.py file. So we went through the URLs, and now the only two files which are left are WSGI.py and ASGI. WSGI stands for Web Service Gateway Interface or Web Server Gateway Interface. I think one of the other or the other. And these files looks very similar. And the things which are doing, they are just setting up these web servers which are implemented in Python and allows your Python script written in Django to be, requested or queried from all around the internet, right? We're gonna talk about this later in the future. Now you don't need to understand too many details of it. Just remember these are some management scripts which allows your file to run, okay, or files to run. So these are just the basics about the Python projects. Now the key question is how you're gonna run it. Good question. So I'm going back to my git bash, and now I'm inside the school project, right? So if I press ls, you see there is a manage.py school project. This is the right time to trigger your application. But before doing that, you may consider to initialize a git repository now. So throughout this lecture, I'm gonna stop on some points and tell you when is a good time to create some git commit and git stuff. So after creating a project, it's ideal time for initializing it. I ain't gonna do it because my parent directory it's already a git because I'm pushing everything to git. So you can download it and you can find also the source code for this lecture linked in the description of this video on my git. Please leave a follow on my git. Thank you very much. So to initialize the git, you run the git init command. Right? You may also consider to setting up a git config name and the email, right? You can find on the internet how. But this is the right time to set up the git repository. So after setting up the git repository, you don't need to push it. There is nothing you created right now. You can start to run your Django. And how are you going to do it? So I'm inside here. Yeah, there is the manage.py and school project. So I'm exactly on the same location as I'm in the Visual Studio Code. You can also run it in a terminal here, but I prefer to run it here because I'm an old school guy. Yeah, I used to code in the Sublime text when the Visual Studio Code wasn't that popular, and that it was quite normal to have your console open in a different window and this kind of stuff. And I also prefer this console because you can have multiple windows here. And it's to me, it's more visually friendly, but yeah, you can have here the console if you want. So how to run it? You run the command Python. Now I hope I remember it. Python manage.py, and the command which you're gonna pass to manage.py, which is then gonna be passed to the execute from command line, which is imported from Django, is run server. Run server. Run server will start a development server because debug is set to true in your local computer. Okay, and then you can access this web server, for example, from your browser. So as you can see, it's saying, okay, you can ignore this part, but it's saying Django version 3.2.7 using settings. This is the settings file, starting a development server at localhost 8000. This is localhost is an alias for 172.0.0.0.1. So now if I go to Google and I go to localhost 8000, I will be greeted with this very nice Django. The install worked successfully. Congratulations. So you successfully installed Django and ran your first Django project in your computer. Congratulations. Amazing. Now, before I end up here, so where does this page come from? It's already part of the Django. You don't need to worry about this. It's somewhere behind the scenes. This is why I hate Django, because it's not showing you too much. But yeah, you can dig deeper into source code, but it's not necessarily we ain't going to use this page. The next question, some of you may be asking, okay, so we're going to implement some front ends because this is a front end. No, don't worry. This is just a demo on how to use Django. Later, when we're going to use Django REST framework, none of this will be happening. So the next thing what I want to show you is how to stop this server. You can stop this server by clicking inside here and pressing Ctrl+C. This will stop the development server and you can then interact back with the terminal. So I'm going to clear this. The next thing what you notice is I ran this command, Python manage pyrun server, but I never specify a port on which the application should be running. Out of the box is set to 8000. You can override this by specifying the next parameter behind the run server with the space, and then you specify the port number, for example, 8080. For example, if the 8000 is already taken by another application, you can run this application on a different port. And in this time, when I run this, again, the development server will trigger. Yeah, and now, instead of accessing 8000, because when I refresh this, you will see in a couple of seconds that there will be this site can't be reached error. But if I go to 8080, I will again be greeted with the same page, this time on 8080 port. Perfect. In the description of the video, you will find a link to the documentation of the settings with all the other settings, because these are just the basic settings. You can just bookmark the page. We're going to use this page later. For now, this is enough, even if you don't understand the parts which I was describing, for example, these files or these values. You don't need to worry about this. We're going to cover everything, most of the stuff in the later lectures. So that's everything. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. I hope you left a like and subscribe, and I will be very glad if you write me something nice in the comment section. My name is Michal Hucko. Thank you very much, and I hope I will see you in the next lecture.